Is English your second language and you really want to step up your game to get better at it and become super confident even when talking to natives? Or are you, even as a native English speaker, learning a new language and you just don't seem to make any progress? And are you just sick and tired of people to tell you just need to be disciplined, sit down, study every day, and you'll just get there and at one point be fluent with the language? Then keep watching, because I'm gonna bring you 3 impactful ingredients that will help you master your second language or become conversational in any new language faster. Good morning, beautiful people. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is David and I wish you a very warm welcome to Sensei Cat. Now, for those of you who know the channel, who are subscribed to know me a little bit, you might be asking, why the heck is that karate dude actually talking about languages suddenly after 2.5 years of radio silence? Well, I'll give you an answer to that in a second. For those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. I'm going to tell you what this is all about. So a lot has happened in the past 2.5 years, and I'm currently working as a language and communications coach, where I work a lot with people whose second language is English. And you know, for a lot of people it's hard mastering that second, third or even fourth language, right? Because you get conversational at one point and then it's just so much work to improve so incrementally that it almost doesn't look like it's worth the effort a lot of times, right? Or you start learning, you start picking up a new language, you go on Duolingo, you are super motivated, but then it just takes so long to get conversational. And believe me, I've been there. I have learned English as my second language, you know, like way back in school, still in Germany. And then later on in school I learned French, and then I got into university and I learned Japanese, right? I have learned a few languages myself. So without further ado, these are my 3 top ingredients that will help you become conversational or master a language quicker and with more fun. Number 1. Start with why. So there's a really good TED talk by Simon Sinek, which also has a corresponding book, which is called Start at Why. And he talks about how in marketing and when you present kind of a corporate mission statement or anything for that matter, how you should start with giving your reason why it is that you do what you do. His explanation for starting with why it is so impactful is that our brain is wired to that question of why, because this is the very, how to say, like the very core, the inner emotional response that people have to a specific product, or be it a company like Apple in Simon Sinek's example. And for languages, this is very helpful as well, figuring out why do you actually want to learn this language. So is it that you want to get a better career opportunity at a company abroad, or you want to study abroad, right? And you want to improve your English for that. Or you just want to really immerse yourself in a different country's culture, and English is the number 1 way to communicate really across cultures. Or ask yourself, do you just want to learn a fancy language in order to be cool at parties? Maybe it would be worth thinking that the experiences that you might get in a different culture and the stories that you pick up, you know, when talking to the locals and when traveling the country, that those stories make you an interesting person at parties. So I personally had a really interesting experience when I was trying to step up my English game back in middle school. It wasn't in order to improve my grades. My grades in English have always been alright. It wasn't at the time because I knew I wanted to study abroad or anything. I was actually quite comfortable with English. But in fact, the reason why I really wanted to step up my English game back then was because I decided I wanted to write songs in English. Until then, I had written songs in German. And I decided that German wasn't a cool language, or not as cool a language as English, so I wanted to write really cool, good songs in English. The problem with that for me was my repertoire of English literary devices wasn't even half as big as my repertoire in German. Obviously, because German is my native tongue, English isn't, it's my second language still. I looked it up on the internet, looked for, you know, songwriting tips, techniques, and I even built like little vocabularies with expressions and idioms and whatnot in English that would help me with certain topics of songs. I wanted to write very intricate lines and very interesting stories in my songs, and for that I just needed to step up my English game, and that was my why. That was my motivation that kept me going at the time. So the reason why you want to understand why you want to learn a language is because by answering why you do what you do, you're starting to identify with the act of learning and mastering that language, and that will help you keep going, because if you abandon learning the language, you're kind of abandoning your own identity. Tip number 2. Finding your why really segues nicely into this tip. On top of understanding why you want to learn a language, identify a strong emotional tie that you have to that language. Maybe learning that language or traveling to that country is your childhood dream. Make it a reality, you know, get that feeling of fulfilling your childhood dream. It is amazing. Or maybe you want to connect with your significant other's family because they are from a different country, from a different culture, and in order to connect with that new family, because you want to spend the rest of your life with that person, you want to also connect with the people that are dear to them. So learn the language because of that, in order to have that connection to them. When I entered university and starting to learn Japanese, that was really a fulfillment of a childhood dream of mine. So I grew up extremely influenced by Japanese pop culture, or at least like the bit of Japanese pop culture that swapped over to Europe. I started doing karate because I wanted to become like Son Goku at one point, and in the same way, I always wanted to go to Japan, you know, to go to that country that for once produced all those fictional characters that I looked up to. So if you're able to identify that emotional tie to learning that language. Tip number 3. So the idea for tip number 3 is that you have to set beneficial short-term goals. And a lot of people say that, but it's very easy when you look at, for example, sports, you know, like as a karate athlete, had those competitions throughout the year that I was working towards. But with languages, it's a little bit different. First of all, a lot of times the progression is so invisible, especially when you want to go from being advanced or adept in a language to mastery. So in order to stay motivated throughout the journey, right, you want to look at small things that you can work towards and things that give you a sense of accomplishment. But again, languages are not like sports. You don't have those competitions throughout the year that you can work towards. But really, who wants to take a TOEFL or a TOEIC every 6 months? Like, first of all, it's going to be expensive, which is unnecessary. And second of all, it's just not fun. So there are a few ways you can set, or a few examples for those short-term goals that will keep you going. For example, you would want to translate a song text into the language. Maybe it's writing an essay, a full essay in that language that forces you to not translate from your language into that, but to think in the actual language. And really everything counts, to be honest, you know, as long as it is clearly defined what success is and what failure is. When it comes to translating that song text, it might be you want to translate it without a dictionary, and that way, as soon as you have to look up a word and you can't find another way to say it, you lose the challenge, right? Then you have to start over again, maybe with another song. And again, to give you a little example from my own experience, kind of the same time that I started learning Japanese, when I entered university, suddenly I was confronted with having to read 300 pages worth of academic English every single week. And what I did was, I made it my goal to reduce the total time that I needed for reading those texts. So every time I would read, I would have a stopwatch with me and check how long it took me. And then the next week, obviously for the same amount of content, I was trying to bring that time down every single week, to the point where I was able to really decrease the time it took me to prepare for my classes. And then by just pushing myself and really focusing on increasing that speed every single week, I was able to drive it down to 4.5 hours, 4 hours, and probably by the end of my second semester, I was down to 3.5 hours more or less. So that's my tip number 3. Set yourself achievable goals in order to get that feeling of achievement, right? And to be honest, you know, like, learning languages is hard anyway, so make a game out of it, right? There needs to be some fun in the topic. Alright guys, those were my top 3 ingredients that I think are extremely crucial and extremely impactful when it comes to improving your language learning experience. Be that if English is your second language and you want to really master it to get a new career opportunity or study abroad, or it is just not getting anywhere with learning a new language and you really want to become conversational in, let's say, Spanish or Portuguese or Korean or Japanese or whatever. To be honest, guys, as I said, learning a language is hard. There will always be the point where you just have to sit down and study. Just make it a little bit more enjoyable, make it fun, you know, like find an emotional connection to that language that you speak, understand why you are interested in it. In that way, you can really almost hack your own perception of needing to sit down and study, but because that way it becomes like meditation, it becomes good for your soul to chase a childhood dream. And if you want to get deeper into the topic, there are tons of great resources out there that talk about very practical advice and very practical things that you can do in order to speed up the process of learning the language. For example, there's a great blog post by Benny Lewis, actually is his name, that he wrote on Tim Ferriss's blog, where he talks about 12 tips or 12 techniques that you can use in order to learn any foreign language quicker. I think it's a really great read. I'll leave the link down in the description below so you can read that, and if you want to, you can really go down the whole rabbit hole, and there is tons of stuff to read on the topic. So what about you, like your own language learning experience? Have you always kind of just intuitively used all those tips that I was talking about today and it's just worked out and it's been really easy for you? Or just at one point you figured out something and it suddenly became easier while it was harder before? Or are you like was that something new that I was able to share with you maybe today that you can then more actively incorporate in your learning experience? I would really like to know about that down in the comments below. If there are other topics related to this, similar things about communication and languages that you want me to talk about, please feel free to also leave a suggestions in the comment section below. If you like this video, please consider liking this video. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe because it also helps out the channel. And I'll see you in the next one.